Portal is a game that can be defined in a single word as Anywho, Portal has had a significant impact in my life. You see, I graduated from college and I found myself busy with the next chapter of life. As I got into the regular 9-to-5 grind, I found myself yearning for something to get my mind off of work and get me some me time. I had played plenty of video games growing up, but I had mostly been locked in on Call of Duty for the past few years, throughout college basically. I had a ton of fun playing Gunfight with my roommates, but after I graduated, it became a lot harder to stay in touch with them because I was the one who had the Xbox, so they didn't really have a way to play with me anymore. I could go on and on about how much I enjoy Gunfight, and I think everyone should play. It's such a fun game mode to play with friends, but it definitely doesn't hit the same without your friends. That's the main component. And you know, I even tried playing COD by myself in random lobbies with random people, but I just couldn't find the same amount of joy in it. I needed something to help me relax, not the opposite, which is what COD was doing, making me even more frustrated. I had enough of that from work, so I needed something else to kind of help me chill and just have a good time. At this point, I didn't really know what I could do. I thought maybe that I just stopped liking video games entirely. Throughout all of this though, I still kept up with watching the latest gaming videos and retrospectives. I really enjoyed watching other people talk about games and what games were significant to them. I just found it really interesting. Even if I had no plans in ever playing a game, I just really liked hearing about it and the stories and how much it meant to them. So I don't really know if there was a specific video or if I've just heard over time like, oh, you should try this game, you should try this game. And so yeah, I finally decided to try a new game. Well, not necessarily new, but new for me. And you already know what that game is. Clash of Clans. Clash of Clans is a strategy video game where players build and upgrade their village. You gotta admit, that would be a pretty good transition into a sponsor if that was actually a sponsor, but unfortunately no, I'm not getting paid for this, so we'll move on. The game is obviously Portal. And before we jump into my experience with Portal, let's talk a little bit about the background of how it became the masterpiece that we all know and love today. Portal's journey began not at a major game studio, but in a classroom at the DigiPen Institute of Technology. A group of students developed a prototype called Narbacular Drop, which was a quirky first-person puzzle game that introduced a simple yet mind-bending mechanic: portals. In Narbacular Drop, you couldn't jump, but you could place two interconnected portals and manipulate momentum and space to move around. That core idea, using portals to solve spatial puzzles, was unlike anything else at the time. At this time, Valve developer Robin Walker stumbled upon Narbacular Drop at a DigiPen career fair in 2005. He was so impressed that he invited the student team to present their game at Valve's offices, and that meeting turned into a job offer from Gabe Newell himself. Newell saw that this wasn't just a cool mechanic, but a fully realized design foundation, one that Valve could build into something far greater. He was struck by how much of the heavy lifting the students had already done, including the integration of physics and the gameplay around the portal mechanic. Once inside Valve, the team began developing what would become Portal. They first built a stripped-down prototype using DigiPen's internal 2D engine to further refine the Portal concept. Many ideas from Narbacular Drop carried over, like the orange and blue color-coded portals, but some things were left behind, such as the original fantasy setting where a princess tried to escape a dungeon. That was replaced with something colder, stranger, and much more sterile: the futuristic testing labs of Aperture Science. The development process took a little over 2 years, and remarkably, the entire game was built by a team of fewer than 10 people. This was basically an indie game, which is awesome because of how big it's grown since then. During the first year of development, Portal was essentially just a puzzle sandbox. Playtesters loved the mechanics, but they kept asking, why am I doing all this? That question forced the team to start crafting a narrative, and that's when Portal became more than just the clever physics demo that they'd been working on this whole time. Valve brought in Mark Laidlaw, the writer behind the Half-Life series, to help figure out how Portal could tie into the larger Valve universe. This decision was partly out of necessity because the team didn't have the resources to build a whole new world from scratch, so they reused art assets from Half-Life 2. Laidlaw later admitted that he wasn't thrilled about the crossover. He felt it risked shrinking both worlds, but ultimately, it gave Portal a sense of place and continuity. One of the bigger decisions that Valve ended up doing that shaped Portal forever is hiring the writers Eric Wolpaw and Chet Falazek, best known at the time for their work at Old Man Murray, to inject personality and dark humor into the sterile walls of Aperture Science. It was this collaboration that gave birth to one of gaming's most iconic characters, GLaDOS.
Well, you found me. Congratulations. Was it worth it? Because despite your violent behavior, the only thing you've managed to break so far is my heart.
From the very beginning, the writing team wanted an AI guide who would steer the player through the game's puzzles. But they didn't just want another robotic voice. They wanted a character with nuance, comedy, and menace. The early drafts had the AI issuing absurd requests like, assume the party escort submission position. And the team quickly realized they were onto something special. The sarcastic, deadpan, yet weirdly cheerful tone became central to Portal's identity.
Very impressive. Please note that any appearance of danger is merely a device to enhance your testing experience.
GLaDOS evolved to become the narrative spine of the entire game. Her dialogue shifts from cold instructions to passive-aggressive threats to full-on psychological warfare, reflecting the game's progression from test chamber tutorials to existential horror. According to Wolpaw, they designed GLaDOS to evolve emotionally across the game's 3-act structure, starting as a friendly guide, becoming a manipulative overseer, and finally revealing herself as a full-blown antagonist. And yes, the cake was always a lie. According to Wolpaw, the team jokingly discussed what philosophical underpinning should define the game's worldview. After some awkward silence, someone said, "A lot of people like cake," and that became the motive. Simple, mysterious, memorable. Now let's talk about Portal's minimalism. Portal's minimalistic aesthetic wasn't just an artistic choice, it was practical. Early tests showed that players often got distracted by background details that weren't part of the puzzle, so the team stripped the environment down to its bare essentials, creating a sterile, futuristic testing facility inspired by the film The Island. The clean white walls, glass surfaces, and moving platforms served a dual purpose: clarity for gameplay and a chilling atmosphere of clinical detachment. One interesting omission was a planned third zone, an office-like space to follow the test chambers and industrial back corridors. However, it was cut due to time constraints, along with a deeper introduction for the mysterious Ratman, the character who scrawled cryptic messages on the walls. While Ratman didn't appear in the game, he later became central to the Lab Rat comic, which bridged Portal and Portal 2. Moving on to the final boss. GLaDOS' boss battle went through several versions, including one where you dodge James Bond-style lasers or chase her through collapsing corridors. Eventually, the team realized a simple puzzle with a countdown timer created just enough pressure to feel exciting. It was cheap, it was focused, and more importantly, it worked. But before that final showdown, the player had to incinerate one of Portal's most beloved objects, the weighted companion cube. What started as a simple design solution, getting players to carry a box through a long level, became an emotional anchor. To help players remember the cube, the team added a heart to it, wrote custom dialogue, and built an entire level around keeping it safe. Then, just when you'd grown attached, they forced you to destroy it. That act became a darkly emotional turning point, preparing players for the moral ambiguity of the final encounter.
Companion cube certainly brought you good luck. However, it cannot accompany you for the rest of the test and, unfortunately, must be euthanized. Please escort your companion cube to the aperture. You euthanized your faithful companion cube more quickly than any test subject on record. Congratulations.
Alright, going back to my experience. Portal is a very simple game. No tutorials needed. It's a tutorial in itself. The first few levels are very basic as you get the hang of the mechanics, and the game gradually gets more tricky and complicated. It's very fun to think through each level, and you definitely get a hit of dopamine every time you solve a level. When I first started playing, I didn't realize how short the game was, so I ended up finishing the game in just one playthrough, which isn't hard, but I couldn't put it down. Portal became an escape for me. It made me think, which I feel like not a lot of games can make you think about your own life, but that's what it became for me. It opened my eyes to the monotony of the corporate world and what could happen if you go against the grain. Portal teaches you how to think, but more importantly than that, it teaches you to question why you're being asked to think that way. Why this box? Why this rule? Why this cube? The game's sterile environments reflect the modern workplace. A clean, quiet space where you're told what to do, how to do it, and in what order. When you start exploring, breaking out of bounds, or refusing to do what you're told, the illusion begins to fall apart. It's no coincidence that the game's core mechanic is literally stepping outside of the expected path. A portal isn't just a puzzle solution, it's a symbol. It says, there is another way. You don't have to follow the arrows. You don't have to stay in the box. This really spoke to me because I felt like I was trapped at my job, just going through the motions and doing what I was told. I've always worked hard and have been an ideal employee wherever I've worked. I'm constantly checking all the boxes and even going above and beyond and, trying my hardest to please my boss. But even with the hard work that I've done, getting a job for me was difficult coming out of college. I was offered a job fairly early on in my senior year of college, but the salary was quite a bit lower than what I was hoping for. So ultimately I was happy to take the job, but after seeing all the offers my classmates were getting, it was hard not to feel left out, and it kind of made me doubt my worth. So for the rest of my senior year, I remember applying to tons of different places. I tried everything that I could to find another job, but in the end, nothing worked out. So I took the offer that I got, and as I started the job, I learned quickly and began contributing to the team significantly. It was a young company, so there weren't very many employees. It was basically me and maybe 4 other people. So it was really small. I had always thought that if you join a small company, you can really grow with the company and they can elevate you and promote you and that you'll get paid more. But as the company started to grow and explode in sales, it became apparent that both the quantity and the quality of my work to help get us to that place was not being compensated fairly, at least what I thought was fair. So I started asking the same questions that Portal kind of leads you towards asking, which are, why am I working here? Why am I getting paid below what I should? It felt like I was stuck in a black hole, and I wanted something to change. The cake is a lie. It's one of the most iconic lines in gaming, but it hits harder than just a meme. It's a metaphor for false promises. The promotion that never comes. The dream job that's just another cubicle. The American dream. Work hard, keep your head down, and someday you'll be rewarded. But will you? Portal doesn't answer that for you, but it does show you what happens when you stop believing in the cake. I'm sure lots of people can relate. What are you actually working towards? That promotion that you've been promised? Does it actually happen? Here's the thing. I don't think all of corporate America is bad. You can definitely get satisfaction from your job and you can be well compensated. That just hadn't been the case for me up to this point. There were lots of unfulfilled promises, and it just left me going through the same motions, thinking and hoping that things would get better. But did they? Not really. So I had to start looking elsewhere. I knew what I was capable of, so I wanted to get out of the box. The moment that changed everything in Portal wasn't a puzzle. It was the moment that you realize the tests aren't ever going to end. GLaDOS had no intention of letting you go. That's when the game becomes something more than just a puzzle platformer. It becomes an escape story. But in this story, Chell doesn't give a big speech. She doesn't rage against the machine. She just quietly keeps moving forward. She uses the very tool that was meant to control her, the portal gun, to subvert the system. And that's the part that stuck with me after the credits rolled. You don't need to scream to rebel. Sometimes Rebellion is persistence. It's adaptation. It's realizing you don't have to play the rules of someone else's game. So here's why Portal meant so much to me. I used Portal as an escape from my 9 to 5. But somewhere along the way, I realized it wasn't just about escaping. It was about rethinking the system that I thought I was forced to live in. It made me question things. Why am I working at this job? Why did it feel like I was just solving the same puzzles every single day, hoping for cake? So how does this work in real life? Unfortunately, I don't have a portal gun at my disposal, so you kind of have to be creative and make the best of your situation. I could keep waiting for the promised cake, but it felt like I would keep getting used and squeezed for every ounce of usefulness, but only being compensated at the smallest amount possible. So Portal isn't this magical potion that you can play and that your entire life will work out and change overnight, but it changed the way about how I thought. And sometimes that's the first portal you need to open. Portal was an escape for the monotonous 9 to 5 workday. It ended up not just being a fun video game, but it helped me realize that I don't have to play along with the system. That doesn't necessarily mean that I need to revolt and change everything in my life, but it gave me hope that just because I'm in a poor situation, it doesn't mean that I need to be like that forever. It just takes little steps. The first step is just try something out that you truly enjoy doing. And that's what this video is for me. I really enjoy putting these together and sharing with the world. I've also tried other ventures like creating content for sports or making t-shirts. And the point is, not everything worked. Basically, nothing worked. But it brought me hope and newfound purpose in creating and doing something that I truly enjoyed. And you know, life is hard. You're not always going to love your job. And sometimes you can't leave. Kind of like the situation I was in. I couldn't leave because that was paying the bills. And even when I tried applying to other places, nothing really worked out. So sometimes you just have to make the best of your situation. Try to find joy in the little things. And that can slowly change your perception of the situation that you're in. It still may never be the exact ideal situation that you want to be in, but at least you can try to make it just a little bit more positive for yourself. In the end, Portal is a masterclass in minimalism, humor, and subversion. It didn't need sprawling open worlds or complex combat mechanics. It just needed a simple idea and the courage to ask a dangerous question. What if you just walked away? So if you're stuck in a loop right now, whether it's a job, a routine, or a mindset, maybe it's time that you find your own portal. You don't have to wait for permission. You just have to think with portals.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here, huge success. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction. Aperture science. We do what we must because we can.